All right. So, we like to go deep on interesting stuff. And
Yeah.
you sent me this Simon Sinek interview on the Diary of a CEO podcast, and
What
I
did
thought it was super fascinating. So,
Lots to unpack.
yeah, lots to unpack. I mean, it's Simon Sinek, right? He always
Yeah. Yeah.
has something interesting to say.
Yes, yeah.
So we thought we'd pull out some of the most interesting points from that and,
Help you connect them to your life.
yes, help you connect them to your life. So, like, right off the bat, he starts talking about this concept of why
Yeah.
your purpose.
Finding your why, yeah.
Finding your purpose. And he believes that it's shaped by your experiences, your childhood experiences.
Especially childhood.
Especially childhood, both good and bad.
Yeah, he's big on that, right? Like
Yeah.
the things that happened to you early on sort of define your trajectory.
Yes, and he gives this really compelling example of a woman whose childhood was actually abusive.
Yeah.
And she ended up dedicating her life to protecting others. So it's like this why emerged from this place of pain.
Right. So that makes you think, how has your childhood shaped your why? The good and the bad.
Oh, absolutely. That's a great point. And what are the things that are pushing you forward? What are the things that are holding you back?
That's the question, right?
Yeah. And the host, Stephen Bartlett, actually brings up this really interesting counterpoint to Sinek's story about the woman.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So he basically says, okay, but is a why rooted in trauma
Okay.
truly positive if it ultimately leads to unhappiness for the person?
Right. Can you build a purpose
Yeah.
around healing from a painful past if you never actually...
You never address your own needs.
Yeah, if you never actually get to a good place, right?
Right.
Can you pour from an empty cup?
Yeah. Yeah, and Sinek acknowledges this tension, right?
Okay.
He talks about the importance of balance, like recognizing that we might have this driving why that makes us want to give to the world. But we also need people who are committed to taking care of us.
I love that. It's this
Yeah.
beautiful idea of interconnectedness.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, we're not alone on this journey of figuring out our why and living it.
Right. We need to both give and receive, right?
Yes, absolutely. We have to do both. And that actually leads perfectly into the next big topic they tackle, mindset,
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
which is so
It's
interesting.
a huge topic.
So is a positive mindset a privilege
Okay.
or is it a choice?
Like nature versus nurture.
Nature versus nurture.
Yeah.
Bartlett kind of leans towards privilege.
Okay.
He shares his personal story about growing up in poverty.
Okay, so he's got experience with this.
Yeah, he actually admits to shoplifting food when he was broke.
Wow.
But even then, he had this belief that he was going to be a millionaire.
So he had this...
He had this unwavering belief,
Okay.
and he attributes that to his upbringing and his experiences.
Okay.
But Sinek doesn't completely agree.
Okay.
So Sinek acknowledges that privilege creates advantages.
Sure.
But he ultimately believes that we have the power to choose
Okay.
how we perceive the world.
And react to it.
It's about recognizing that your past doesn't define you, but you have the ability to move on.
It's about agency. It's about recognizing that we're not prisoners to our past.
Yes.
And this is where Sinek drops a really important point that I think is so key.
Okay, hit me.
He says that we all need to have at least one person in our lives who truly believes in us.
That's huge, yeah.
Who believes in us.
Yeah, think about who that person is for you. It could be, a parent, a friend, a partner.
A mentor.
Yeah.
Someone whose belief in you helps you see it in yourself.
Helps you see your own potential.
Yes.
That you might not even see.
Exactly. When you're doubting your own abilities, having that external validation
Yeah, can be life-changing.
can be completely transformative.
So true. Okay, so let's shift gears a little bit and talk about the post-COVID work landscape.
Oh, yeah, let's talk about work. Because Sinek has some really interesting observations about how it's impacting our relationship with work,
I know, and I'm fascinated by this. So tell me, what does he say about remote work?
Like, is he pro or con?
Yeah, is he pro or con?
He's not black and white about it, actually.
Well.
He sees both sides.
Okay.
He acknowledges the freedoms and flexibility,
Sure.
right,
Yeah.
which come with working remotely. But he also points out some potential downsides
Oh,
that we need to be aware of.
like what?
Well, he talks about how even though you might have more control over your schedule and your environment, remote work can lead to, decreased brainstorming effectiveness.
Right.
It's harder to bounce ideas off each other when everyone's in their own little Zoom boxes.
It's true. You don't get that same energy
Right,
as
yeah.
being in person.
And he also worries about the blurring of work-life boundaries.
Oh, tell me about it.
When your home is your office, it can be tough to switch out
It's so hard.
and disconnect, right? And he especially has some thoughts about the impact on younger generations.
Oh, interesting. What does he say about that?
Well, he's concerned that a lot of young people, especially Gen Z,
Okay.
are looking to their work to fulfill needs that were traditionally met by, their community,
Okay.
social connections, things like that.
So instead of finding that through their hobbies or
Yeah.
their friendships,
Exactly.
they're expecting their jobs to provide all of that.
They're putting a lot of pressure on their jobs to be their everything.
Right. And is that a recipe for disappointment?
I mean, a job's still a job, right?
Right.
It's not your whole life.
Yeah, it's supposed to be part of a fulfilling life.
Right.
Not the only source of fulfillment.
Exactly. And this leads Cynic to another observation about the modern workplace.
Okay.
The rise of quiet quitting.
Quiet quitting.
Yeah.
I've heard that term. I've seen it. But
Is it just like laziness at work?
what does that even mean?
Right. That's a good question. Cynic describes it as a phenomenon where employees, who are feeling maybe disengaged, undervalued,
Right.
they start to just do the bare minimum.
Oh, so they're not actually quitting their job,
Not quitting outright.
but they're mentally checking out.
Exactly. They've mentally checked out. They're just going through the motions.
Oh, so it's like a silent protest.
Yeah, like a subtle form of protest.
Interesting. So what's driving that? I mean, is it a lack of meaningful work? Is it bad bosses? Is it just...
It's a big question.
Yeah, what is it?
And Cynic and Bartlett both agree that a big part of it is this lack of open communication.
A lack of open and honest communication.
Yeah, in the workplace.
So people are afraid to speak up.
Yeah, they're afraid to rock the boat.
So they're just quietly withdrawing.
Exactly. And this actually ties back to that generational difference conversation.
How so?
Well, Bartlett's worried that Gen Z might be the least resilient generation.
Interesting.
He points to the way social media portrays work, It's all effortless and fun and glamorous.
Right, like hustle culture.
Yeah.
But make it look easy.
Exactly. So then when they encounter the reality of setbacks and long hours
Yeah.
and difficult bosses, it can be a huge shock.
Because no job is all sunshine and roses.
Right, exactly. There are always going to be challenges.
Always going to be challenges.
Yeah.
And Cynic agrees that there's evidence of lower stress tolerance
Yeah.
in younger generations.
Which makes sense if they're not really prepared for those challenges.
Right. And he attributes that partly to a culture that minimizes risk and rejection.
Okay.
So it's like we're so focused on protecting young people from discomfort
Right.
that we're not letting them develop the coping mechanisms they need
You have to fail to learn sometimes.
to deal with the real world.
Yeah, that's how we grow.
Exactly. And he even brings up a fascinating point about online dating.
Oh, really? Okay, I'm intrigued.
I know, right? So he wonders if the ease of swiping left and right, where rejection is less direct,
Okay.
is making young people more sensitive to rejection in other areas of their lives.
So it's like they're not used to
They're not used to it,
having to face that.
right? And so they don't develop the resilience
Exactly.
to deal with it.
Exactly.
Interesting thought.
It is an interesting thought, isn't it?
It is. So what can we do about all of this? Like, what does Cynic suggest for fostering more honesty and resilience in our work lives?
Give me the actionable advice I need to hear.
Well, first and foremost, he emphasizes the importance of treating work relationships like any other relationship.
So, like, with the same level of care and respect that we would give to our friends or our families.
Exactly. It's about building trust, setting boundaries, and communicating openly
Okay.
about what you need from each other.
Which sounds simple enough, but I think so many of us struggle with that.
Yeah, we fall into patterns
Yeah, especially at work.
of just not wanting to cause waves.
Yeah, exactly.
But Cynic has some practical tips for having those tough conversations.
Okay, give them to me.
So he suggests delaying honesty if emotions are running high.
So, take a breath. Cool off.
Cool off before you react.
Don't just react in the heat of the moment. Exactly.
Yeah.
And then when you do have that conversation, focus on finding solutions together.
Okay, so be collaborative.
Be collaborative. Don't just point fingers.
I like it. He actually shares a funny story about attending a friend's terrible play.
Oh.
I know, right? But he knew he needed to give his friend honest feedback.
Yeah.
But he also didn't want to crush them.
Yeah, of course.
So instead of saying anything critical right after the play, he waited until the next day.
So he let the emotions settle?
Yeah, he let the emotions settle, and then he was able to deliver the feedback.
That's such a good example of emotional intelligence.
Isn't it?
Like, timing is everything.
Timing and delivery.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's about choosing the right time and tone.
Right.
to deliver feedback in a way that's both honest and constructive.
Exactly. And remember, this applies to receiving feedback, too.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. Be open to hearing it, even if it's tough.
It's how we grow.
That's how we learn.
Yeah. So it all comes back to communication, right?
Communication is key.
It's the foundation of everything. It really is.
Expressing your needs clearly, listening actively,
Right.
being willing to have those difficult conversations.
Yeah, even when it's uncomfortable.
Even when it's uncomfortable.
Right.
Which brings us to one of the most important points I think that Sinek makes.
Okay.
He says treat work relationships
Okay.
like any other relationship.
Treat them with the same respect and care.
With the same respect and care.
Right. Build that trust.
So how do we actually apply that?
So Sinek suggests companies need to be more upfront about their culture and expectations.
More transparent about what they expect from their employees.
Exactly. It's about honesty from both sides.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So employees are clear about what they're getting into, and companies can attract the right people.
Yeah, setting those boundaries.
Right. Clear boundaries. And Sinek uses this really interesting analogy.
Okay, lay it on me.
Polyamorous relationships.
Oh.
He says, think about it like that. Where open and honest communication is absolutely paramount.
Okay.
Everyone knows where they stand.
Everyone's on the same page. Expectations are defined.
So it's like applying that same level of transparency
To the workplace.
to the workplace. I love that. That's a bold comparison.
It is. It's like imagine a world where we're as open about our career goals and work-life balance preferences as we are about.
As we are about our relationship styles.
Exactly.
I kind of love that idea.
It's an interesting thought experiment.
It is. It's like it could revolutionize how we approach hiring, building teams.
Absolutely. And it ties back to this idea that we're moving away from this traditional rigid model of work.
Yeah, like the 9 to 5.
Right, towards something more fluid and individualized.
More flexible.
More flexible, exactly. And this requires a shift in mindset, I think, both from employers and employees.
Both sides have to be open to it.
Right, for sure. And Sinek argues that embracing vulnerability and honesty, even at the risk of not getting what we want, ultimately leads to more fulfilling relationships.
Because you're being your true self.
Exactly. You're putting it all out there.
And whether it works out or not, at least you were true to yourself.
You know where you stand. And he really emphasizes the importance of having those difficult conversations sooner rather than later.
Don't wait. Don't avoid it.
Rip the Band-Aid off.
Okay. But how do you actually have those conversations?
Like, where do you even start?
Give me the tips I need.
Okay, so Sinek suggests meeting rational communication with rational responses.
Okay.
Delaying honesty if emotions are high.
Take a beat.
Take a step back.
Yeah.
Let things cool down. And then when you do have the conversation, focus on finding solutions together.
Okay, so it's not about placing blame.
No, it's about working together.
Yeah.
To figure out a way forward.
Yeah.
And that also means holding space for the other person.
What do you mean?
Like letting them feel heard and understood
Okay.
without judgment or interruption.
That's tough.
It is tough, especially when you're feeling triggered or defensive.
Oh, yeah.
It takes practice.
Right.
But remember, communication is a skill that can be learned and refined.
Absolutely.
And so the more you practice it, the better you'll get at it.
The more comfortable you'll become.
Exactly. And the stronger your relationships will be.
It's like anything, the more you do it.
The easier it gets.
Yeah. And speaking of vulnerability, Sinek makes a really interesting point about the difference between true vulnerability and the kind of oversharing we often see on social media.
I've been thinking about that a lot lately.
Yeah, it's like vulnerability has become this buzzword, right?
Right. It's like, is it really vulnerability or is it just attention seeking?
Right, exactly. So
Yeah.
what does he say about that?
Well, he argues that true vulnerability is about sharing your authentic self with people you trust, not broadcasting your emotions to the world.
Not for validation.
Right.
Or for likes.
It's not about getting likes.
Okay.
It's about creating safe and intimate spaces.
With people you trust.
Exactly. To share your struggles, your fears.
Where you feel supported.
With people who can offer genuine support. And this idea of vulnerability actually ties into another fascinating point Sinek makes.
Okay, what's that?
About gender differences in leadership.
Oh, interesting.
So he argues that traditional male leadership qualities like decisiveness, aggression, they're often overemphasized.
Like those are the things that are valued in a leader.
While female leadership qualities like empathy, patience, nurturing are undervalued.
It's like we've created this very narrow definition
Right.
of what it means to be a leader.
And it's often based on these outdated stereotypes.
Right. And he's challenging that.
He is. He's saying we need to rethink our definition of leadership.
To be more inclusive.
And embrace those qualities that are often seen as feminine.
Regardless of gender.
Exactly. It's not about pitting men against women.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that we all have strengths and weaknesses.
And the best leaders can leverage all of those.
A diverse range of skills and qualities. And that brings us to a really key takeaway from this whole conversation.
What's that?
Finding balance.
Balance in all areas of our lives.
Exactly. Balancing your personal and professional life. Balancing your own needs with the needs of others. Balancing those traditional masculine leadership qualities with the ones we've been talking about.
Like it's not an either situation.
Right.
It's about finding that sweet spot.
It's about recognizing that life is not a zero-sum game.
I love that.
Yeah.
And Sinek actually poses this question to himself.
Okay.
That I think is so powerful.
Yeah.
And I think everyone listening should ask themselves this.
I'm ready.
He says, what is the greatest fear I have about how I'm currently living my life?
Wow.
It makes you stop and think, doesn't it?
It does. What are we afraid of?
Yeah, what are you holding back from?
Oh, it's holding us back.
What are those fears?
Are we living authentically?
Are you living in alignment with your values?
Big questions.
Big questions. So what was Sinek's answer?
Well, he admitted that his greatest fear is not being completely honest with himself. Because he believes that dishonesty with oneself inevitably leads to dishonesty with others.
And that's a slippery slope.
It is. It's about recognizing that we're all works in progress.
Yeah, always learning, always growing.
And embracing our imperfections.
And now for the closing tradition of the show.
Okay, I love this part.
Where the last guest asks a question for the next guest.
So what did Sinek ask?
Here's his question. What's one conversation you haven't had, which you know you need to, and why haven't you had it?
Ooh, that's a tough one.
It is a tough one.
Yeah.
It's a real challenge.
Makes you think.
To look inward and think about the conversations we've been avoiding.
The tough ones.
Maybe out of fear, maybe out of discomfort, maybe because we want to protect ourselves or others.
Yeah, those are hardest.
But sometimes those are the most important conversations to have.
Absolutely. Sometimes it's just like ripping off a Band-Aid, right?
The longer you wait, the worse it's going to be.
Exactly. And I want to pose that same question to you listening right now.
To everyone listening.
What's one conversation you're going to have after this?
What's that one conversation you need to have? And before we go, I want to highlight something that Sinek does so brilliantly in this interview.
Okay.
He embodies the principles he teaches.
Even when he's being challenged.
Even when he's being challenged. Like there's this moment when Bartlett points out a flaw.
Okay.
In the name of Sinek's online learning platform.
Oh, interesting.
So Bartlett says that Simon Sinek's video subscription library just lacks that emotional resonance.
It's a mouthful.
It is a mouthful.
Not very catchy.
No. And I love that Bartlett brought that up.
Yeah.
Because it's a great example of how even those small details
Yeah.
can impact our perception of value.
Totally. And how did Sinek respond to that?
Oh, it's so good. So he basically says, yeah, you're right.
He agreed.
He agreed. He's like, I have no emotional attachment to that name.
Wow, he's humble.
I know, right?
Yeah.
He's like, I'm open to changing it.
He's willing to be wrong.
I know. It's so refreshing, isn't it?
It is. It shows that he's not too attached to his ideas and that he values feedback.
Yes.
Even when it's critical.
Absolutely. It's a good reminder for all of us.
Right.
To be open to feedback, to be willing to iterate.
Don't be afraid to change your mind.
And to constantly strive to improve.
I love that. And you know what else I really appreciate about Sinek?
What's that?
His focus on accessibility and affordability.
Yeah. He doesn't want his teachings to be just for the elite.
Exactly. He believes that everyone should have access to this kind of knowledge.
Whether you can afford a $1,000 course or not.
Right. Personal development shouldn't be a luxury.
It's a refreshing perspective.
It is.
Wait.
And it ties back to that core message of finding your why.
Everyone has a purpose.
Everyone has a why.
Yes.
It might be shaped by your childhood experiences,
Sure.
but it can evolve and grow as you do.
It's not about being stuck in the past.
Right. It's about using those experiences to learn and grow.
So we have the power to shape our own lives,
We do.
both personally and professionally.
Absolutely. This has been such a great conversation.
It has. I feel like we've covered so much ground.
We have. So what are your biggest takeaways from this deep dive?
For me, it's all about honesty, vulnerability, and open communication.
That's a great summary.
Those are the foundations for building strong relationships
In all areas of your life.
in all areas of your life.
I think that's a good place to wrap up this part of our deep dive.
And it's so freeing, right? Like
Yeah.
we can define success and fulfillment on our own terms
It is. It's about letting go of those societal expectations.
and figuring out what truly matters to you.
Exactly. What makes you feel alive? What makes you feel like you're making a difference?
And it's not always easy, right?
No, it takes work. It takes self-reflection.
And it takes honesty.
Lots of honesty. Honesty with yourself and with others.
And that's something Sinek emphasizes throughout the interview.
Oh, yeah. He's a big believer in radical honesty.
He is. He's like, be honest about your values, your goals, even your fears.
Because when you're honest with yourself...
You can start building a life that actually aligns with who you are.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You stop trying to fit into someone else's mold.
And you give yourself permission to be your authentic self.
And that includes being honest about your struggles, too.
Right. Like we don't have to pretend we have it all figured out.
No, it's okay to not be okay.
It's okay to ask for help.
And that actually brings us back to that point Sinek made about the power of asking for help.
I'm so glad he brought that up.
Yeah.
Because I think so many of us, especially men, struggle with that.
It's like we're conditioned to believe that asking for help is a sign of weakness.
But Sinek flips that on its head.
He says it's actually a sign of strength.
Because it shows you're self-aware enough to know your limits.
And humble enough to seek support when you need it.
And he makes this great point about how true success is often a team effort.
We can achieve so much more when we work together.
When we leverage each other's strengths.
And support each other through challenges.
It's like we don't have to do it all alone.
We're not meant to.
Which brings us back to that core theme of this whole conversation.
Honest communication.
Building those strong, authentic connections.
Both in our personal lives and in the workplace.
Having those tough conversations.
Setting clear boundaries.
Giving and receiving feedback.
And recognizing that communication is a journey, not a destination.
So true. It's an ongoing process.
Of learning, growing, and evolving.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Simon Sinek's wisdom,
Yeah.
we want to leave you with this final question.
Okay, hit us with it.
What are you going to do differently?
After hearing all of this,
Will you have that conversation you've been putting off?
will you reevaluate your relationship with work?
Will you make a conscious effort to be more honest and vulnerable in your relationships?
The choice is yours.
But we hope this deep dive has given you the tools and inspiration to create a more authentic and fulfilling life.
Thanks for joining us.